it completely transforms the way I read books, because I've been an editor, freelance editor now for about, oh my God, like 10 years since I did that stupid quit teaching story I just told you about. And I blagged my way onto it first, and I just did a lot of academic editing. And then I guess the last 7 years, I've kind of been shifting more and more into just doing books. And the last 5 years, it's just been books, which is awesome. But the problem with that is that whenever you're reading, you start thinking as like an editor. So when I'm reading like a Tradpub book, I can see how their editor, the publishing house, the advice they gave them and the changes they made in my head. And it kind of it's cool because I can be like, oh, this world building's really awesome. Oh, I see how they've avoided info dumping here. Oh, I can see what they did with the character arc. So on the one hand, it allows me to like really appreciate my favorite writers. And then when I meet them, I'm just like all gushing and saying, oh, you did this and you're amazing. But on the other hand, like it kind of takes you out of the experience a bit, and you sort of see a few of the tricks of the trade.
What is up, everybody? You're listening to episode 136 of SFF Addicts. I'm your host, Adrian M. Gibson, and welcome to your weekly dive into the world of science fiction, fantasy, and writing craft. Joining me this week to kick off 2025 is my new co-host, my bestie from the Midwestie, the queen of my days, Greta Kelly. How's it going, Greta?
I'm good. I love the queen of my days. Oh, it sounds so romantic and not at all like a bunch of chaos gremlins.
No, not at all. Yeah, the actual, like, sorry for any false expectations about the book. But
yeah.
Speaking of Queen of Days, go pick up The Queen of Days by Greta Kelly. It's out now.
Yeah.
Paperback.
And speaking of great books, if you're interested in some really fun fungal noir mysteries, check out Mushroom Blues.
And if you want to support MJ, our other co-host, you can go pick up her novels, Among Thieves and Thick Ass Thieves. If you want to help support the Thorn Food Fund, among other things, buy our books so you can support our kids. It's all a good time.
Yes, please.
Yeah. As well, a note for our listeners, the official SFF Addicts Patreon and merch store are live, so you can check the links in the description to support what we do here. Also, don't forget to rate and review the podcast on your favorite podcast app, and subscribe to the FanFiAddict YouTube channel, where this and every other episode of the show is available in full video. And now, welcoming to the podcast for the first time, debut author of Lightfall and editor extraordinaire, Ed Crocker. How you doing, Ed?
Hello, I'm good. Debut extraordinaire. That's a intro I can't possibly hope to match.
Well, not with that attitude. Come on.
You know what? It's funny. I was feeling absolutely fine about this interview all week until like today, when I suddenly realized your previous guest was Adrian Tchaikovsky, and now I'm like, and now it's just me. It's just like, so I've suddenly got imposter syndrome, but it's fine. I'm drinking wine, so it's all okay.
You're great.
It's all good. You're kicking off 2025 with us. We had our favorite reads of 2024 live stream, so there was an icebreaker to cleanse the palate before we talk about vampires and shit.
Okay. Kicking off with me, it's all uphill from here, isn't it?
Exactly, dude. Starting your debut high. All right, well, for anyone who doesn't know you, let's do a little bit more of an intro if you can let listeners and viewers know a bit more about yourself.
Yeah, sure. First of all, congratulations to Greta on her first official co-hosting thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, little Greta clap there. That was just giving me time to think in my head. Do you see what I did there?
Good delay tactic.
Yeah, delay tactic. I'm Ed Crocker, as you already guessed. Book-wise, my debut fantasy, Lightfall, which is the first in an epic fantasy trilogy, is being published in something scary, like 3 weeks or something, 14th of January.
Yeah, when people check this episode out, it'll be next week.
Oh, don't say that. That's terrifying. Yeah, so that's the first in an epic fantasy trilogy with vampires, werewolves, and sorcerers, but no humans, which I'm sure we'll talk about. In my day job, I'm a freelance editor, working on books. So I work on a lot of SFF books, which is very cool. And I also review books for FanFiAddict.com. Yeah, I guess that's me really. So author, editor, reviewer, jack of all trades, and a master of absolutely none. That would be the best way to describe me.
Well, you just kind of ruined the extraordinaire thing that I dropped at the beginning, but that's okay.
Yeah, you gotta like work on the on the showmanship here.
That's what I do. I let people bring me up, and then I just do myself down. That's my. It's very British.
He's British. He's
There's something
British.
very British
Yes,
about
exactly.
that.
The
Yeah.
self-flagellation. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Americans are constantly saying to me, like, you got to stop doing yourself down, and I'm like, it's just what we do. Like, if you live in Britain all day long, it's just people competing to criticize themselves. And yeah, it's just what we do, unfortunately. So
It's a good time.
Well, let's dive into that. No, I'm kidding.
Let's psychoanalyze Ed.
Let's dive into your nerdy background and maybe tell us, like, how did you get into science fiction, fantasy, just genre fiction in general? Was it a TV show or books growing up that really brought you into the genre?
So I guess the villain origins of me, I guess, it would be if you start really young, so around 5 or 6, I started watching the classic Doctor Who. So my dad would take me to you won't know this, is a place in I don't even know if it's still going. HMV. It's like a place where you go to get films and music.
Yeah, I remember
and stuff.
HMV.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, cool. Okay. Good reference, yeah.
I mean, we had it in Canada. I don't know about the States, but.
Oh, okay.
Not in my remote little corner of the US.
No, I think it's because Canada is like a British territory. It was, and then
Okay.
they just kind of like, yeah, we'll fucking put some stuff over there.
We'll just copy that. And so back then, this is how old I am, elder millennial. It was for all the Gen Zs watching. It wasn't. I was going to say it wasn't DVDs. They won't even know what a DVD is. So back before streaming, we had DVDs. So I'm patronizing Gen Z now. And then before that, we had VHS, which was like a big cassette tape, I think. And I would go to HMV every week and buy a new Doctor Who episode. If you don't know Doctor Who, I'm talking about the classic series, 1963 to 1989. I think that's right. Hardcore fans might shout at me. Oh, I am a hardcore fan. What are you talking about? And
also, if they don't know who Doctor Who is, just get out. Just get out.
Yeah.
You're not welcome here.
Yeah, everyone loves Doctor Who. It's fine. It's all good. And it got me into. It was my first proper experience of sci-fi and fantasy, I guess, because it's kind of both. But also horror, because Doctor Who fans will know that there's some really scary episodes of Doctor Who, and as like a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old, like I was terrified by some of them. And that's when I realized, like, I love both genres, horror and SFF. So I built up this massive VHS collection. By the time I was like 12 or 13, I think I had like 120 just like lined up on my bedroom wall.
How proud were you of all of like the cassette tapes with all their cases like lined up looking pretty?
It was honestly, I'd stand there, Adrian. I'd just stand there and look at them.
I would do that too.
Just be like,
I would do that too. I had like my video game collection that like extended into my VHS collection and then extended into my DVD collection because we transcended so many boundaries of mediums. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I did something awful because when I was like a stupid teenager, like I don't know, 18 and 19, my dad was like moving house and he was like, what are we going to do with all these VHSs? Which by then was like old technology. And I was like, oh, just get rid of them, Dad, And now I'm like, worst mistake of my life. I would just have them on my current living room wall and just look at them all day. I'm really sad about that. So yeah, Doctor Who was
Life
a big
regrets,
one. Yeah. And then when I was around age 10, I read Lord of the Rings, which is, I'm aware that's quite a precocious thing to do. I was one of those very annoying young kids who read adult books early and everyone hated, and to be fair, it took me like 2 months to read, and it was amazing because if you ever read a book for that long, which you don't tend to do as an adult, but you kind of like live in the book. So that was my first like proper reading experience of a fantasy world. And that was amazing. And then as a teenager, I kind of got off. I stopped reading fantasy a little bit and started getting into horror fiction. It's like Stephen King and all that stuff back in the day. And then fantasy wise, I guess I got into comics. So that was like my teenage nerdy thing. There was like a comic store in Manchester called Forbidden Planet. Don't know if you guys have Forbidden Planet.
No, but I know of it.
Okay, yeah. This is like a test. I just keep throwing British references at you.
My mom is British, so I know a lot of this stuff.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
We talk the same language. I get it. Greta's like,
I
what the
just
hell?
left to a land that was
here,
like
it's
left
fine.
self-critical. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
there's more space and room to breathe and think.
yeah, exactly. So I go to this comic book store, Forbidden Planet, which Adrian knows, and I just buy like Spider-Man comics, Marvel comics, and I spend all the money on them. And that was like my teenage years, and then horror reading and Discworld, Terry Pratchett's Discworld. I'll stop now because I'm just throwing references at you. But yeah, that takes you up to like 19 or something.
No, but it's like it's a very varied sort of experience with SFF and horror. And I think the variety of stuff that you consumed growing up, it makes sense kind of like getting to know you as an adult. Like, yeah, this tracks with what I know of Ed. But like, how did your reading background?
This massive nerd, yeah.
Yeah, this massive nerd with a heart of darkness. How did your reading background and your experiences with, because you were in journalism, you were a teacher, how did that kind of all feed into your writing?
Yeah, so I'll start with the reading background, I guess, because I started writing short stories when I was a teenager, about 14, 15. And then I just wrote horror stories because I was really into horror fiction, like I said. So for about probably 10 years, I just wrote horror short fiction, basically. Didn't write any fantasy or anything like that. I was obsessed with writing horror. And I got a few published and stuff, but like nothing major. And that kind of, I kind of have like a sort of weird journey where I sort of do a lot of ridiculous things in my 20s that don't lead to anything. And then I finally decide I want to be an author. So I'll take you on a very short journey through. I don't know if your guys' 20s were just like pointless.
Mine wasn't pointless, but it was a shit show.
Yeah. You're a bit
I think that's just being in the 20s is being kind of a shit show.
Yeah.
Par for the course.
Well, I say this to everyone. I say like, oh God, my 20s were terrible. And they're like, well, yeah, ours were as well. That's the thing. But you guys have families and stuff. Like, you're a little bit more on it than me. I just messed around. So I did law at university, and then I didn't want to be a lawyer. So then I did journalism as a master's, which is what you mentioned. And then I failed to get a job as a journalist because it was a 2008 global crash. That's my excuse.
It's a good excuse, though.
Yeah, it is a good excuse, isn't it? Why didn't you get that job, Ed? Oh, global crash, innit? God, that's bloody crash. Was it like? Wasn't it just because you were like really rubbish? No. It was a crash. It was a crash. Am I allowed to swear, by the way?
Yeah, of course.
Oh, I am. Oh, excellent. Okay, I was.
Have you not heard me swear like at least 10 times by now?
I've wanted to swear about 10 times now, and I was like, oh, I'm going to have to ask at some point. So yeah, I was really fucking shit at getting a job at journalism. And then I became a teacher after a terrible job at call center. Now you're probably thinking, why are you giving me your whole life story, Ed? I just want to know about how this affected writing. Because journalism and teaching didn't affect my writing at all. They were obstacles to my writing. They were stupid, pointless obstacles to what I actually wanted to do because I was flailing around in my 20s like a lot of people. So when I was, and stop me if this gets a long life story because it's hard to explain without getting into point. When I was a teacher in my first year, I got really sick. Like, I don't know if it was like food poisoning, alcohol poisoning, who knows? And I was in bed for like a week in the Easter holidays teaching, which is rubbish if you're a teacher. You don't want to be sick in the holidays. And second week, I was like, I need to go on holiday because I just had a rubbish first week. So I went to York, which is like, Adrian with his British knowledge will be all over this. Lovely city in the north. Yeah. Greta's like, where's York?
New York?
I've seen enough BBC shows. It's fine.
It's a really stupid running joke I've created where Greta doesn't know anything about Britain, but Adrian knows everything. I'm I'm sorry, Greta.
Stereotyping Americans. Come on, man.
I
It's
know,
fine.
half the
We
audience.
deserve it.
No, I love Americans. I'm Polish American, not my country, so I love you. Anyway, so I'm in York, this beautiful northern city, very old medieval streets, my favorite place in the world. And I'm wandering around, and I'm like, why am I being a teacher? I don't like it. No offense to the kids who were awesome and the teachers who were awesome and everything else. It just wasn't for me. I was a bit rubbish, and to put it mildly. And I was walking around going, oh, I just remembered I wanted to be a writer. Yeah, I just remembered that. Why have I forgotten that, for a few years? So I came back at the end of my first year of teaching going, I'm going to leave at the end of the next year. And I didn't tell anyone. And I did. I left at the end of the next year and just quit my job. Didn't have any money lined up. Didn't have know what I'd do for money. I just had to quit, if that makes sense. And I thought my friends and family would just be like, you mad person. But they were very nice. They were very patient. Even though internally they're probably thinking, what's crazy Ed doing now? And then I just started writing my first book, but I didn't have any money, so it was like a horrible 6 months. And then I sort of blagged my way onto freelance editing. And I'll stop now because Adrian probably has like all these questions he wanted to.
You're leading into it, man. You're leading into it.
Yeah, we were just going to talk about their freelance editing experience. Tell us a little bit about that, because you must have learned just so much from being an editor and applying that to your own writing. And also, how has that changed your perspective on genre fiction in general?
Oh, that's a good question. So sorry, that sounded really patronizing. I genuinely mean that's an awesome question.
We can't tell anymore.
Don't worry.
That's the thing about being British. Everything you say is really patronizing. It's like, okay. Even though you're trying to, So stop laughing, Adrian. You make me laugh. So how has it affected my view of, well, it really affects, to start with, how it affects my reading. It completely transforms the way I read books, because I've been a freelance editor now for about, oh my God, 10 years since I did that stupid quit teaching story I just told you about. And I blagged my way onto it first, and I just did a lot of academic editing. And then I guess the last 7 years, I've kind of been shifting more and more into just doing books. And the last 5 years, it's just been books, which is awesome. But the problem with that is that whenever you're reading, you start thinking as an editor. So it's like, if you're a doctor, whenever you're, I don't know, watching a medical show, you're just thinking I can see what they've done there. That's a really bad analogy, actually. Maybe I should.
No, that's a good analogy. I mean, it's anyone who has an expertise in something, and looks at someone who's really into guns and reads a book and it's just that's not how guns work, or that's not gun lingo, or blah blah blah. Similar sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So, exactly. So when I'm reading a trad pub book, I can see how their editor, the publishing house, the advice they gave them and the changes they made in my head. And it kind of it's cool, because I can be like, oh, this world building's really awesome. Oh, I see how they've avoided info dumping here. Oh, I can see what they did with the character arc. So on the one hand, it allows me to really appreciate my favorite writers. And then when I meet them, I'm just all gushing and saying, oh, you did this and you're amazing. But on the other hand, it kind of takes you out of the experience a bit, and you sort of see a few of the tricks of the trade. In Tradpub, for example, Tradpub Fantasy has this thing where, and I'm not shading Tradpub because I am Tradpub, but it has this thing where a lot of editors say to authors, especially debut authors, they say, you need to explain this thing 3 or 4 times because the readers would not understand. Now, whether or not that's true, let's not get into that. I can see them doing that. I can just see them. By the way, I do it in my own book, so I'm not shading anyone. I'm a sinner as well. But I can see it happening in real time, and I'm just not real time, the opposite of real time, after time. And I'm just this is kind of taken away from experience. So it's a blessing and a curse, I guess. And what was your second point, Greta?
No, I think that was kind of it.
Yeah.
Oh, how it affects my own books. Yeah.
Oh, yes. What what lessons have you learned that you've been able to apply to your own writing?
So this is getting a little bit inside my head here. So I wrote Lightfall, my book, the bones of it. I wrote about 7 years ago, and debut authors have this thing where, well, maybe I'm just speaking for everyone where when it's just me, but debut authors have this thing where we just like, my book's not very good because I wrote it like 7 years ago and it took so long to get an agent and so long to get a book deal. Greta smiling, you know.
I self-pub, so I didn't go through that.
So you're just like, and then your second book, if you write a trilogy, is you now. So you're desperate for people to like forgive you for the first one and just wait till your second one comes out. Now you're probably thinking like, again, this might just be me British criticizing myself, but like I think my first book has a lot of weaknesses. My second book's badass, but I'm just like, will people give me a chance? I don't know. Now, how that's connected to the editing, to go back to the question, there is a point. So in the last 7 years of mainly book editing, all I've been telling authors is be lean. Less is more. Like, I don't mean like too lean, like Tolkien talked about trees for ages. That's awesome. Like, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like redundant stuff or like scenes that don't need to be there, that kind of stuff. That's all I've been like. It's one of the things I always say to authors is like the message like I try and communicate in my job. And because of that, in my own writing, I become much leaner and I become much more disciplined. So my second book, which is currently with my editor, is, I think, like really lean, really kind of like skipping all the pointless stuff, and I think it's much better for it. But my first book, which I wrote the bones of 7 years ago, obviously it's been edited a lot by my agent and then my editor. But I feel like if I had my time again, that would be a little more, a bit of a smoother machine, if that makes sense. So it's made me a better writer, but it's also made me a more paranoid debut author. So yeah, that sucks.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think it's good that you're at least conscious of these lessons that you can then apply. And like Greta, your face when he was talking about like waiting years from when you finish that book until when it actually gets published. Obviously, like I didn't have to go through that trauma with Mushroom Blues, just because I self-published, and the timeline from writing and editing into publishing was it was my own choice of like how I wanted to control that. So I don't necessarily have that same trauma. Maybe self-publishing brings its own traumas to the table.
Yeah, it's different. There's all traumas in publishing, but it's different kinds of traumas, isn't it? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we spend like 10,000 years in some kind of bizarre limbo while publishers do whatever publishers do, not reply to emails. No, I told myself I wasn't going to shade publishing on air. I'm doing it again. I always do this every single interview. I'm so bad. Stop drinking wine.
Ed Crocker, forever debut. No, I'm just kidding.
I was on.
No, but this is true of any time like a group of authors get together, it immediately turns into a therapy session.
Yeah,
so it's okay.
Yeah.
That's what we're here for. Yeah.
Thank you. You are my therapist. But yeah,
we can create a subtitle: SFF Addicts, a therapy podcast.
It's all different traumas. Yeah, we're the same trauma club, but we just come from it at different perspectives.
Exactly. And speaking of your debut, let's get into that a little bit. So, Lightfall, you explained a little bit in terms of it's book one in an epic fantasy trilogy, but do you want to give a little bit more of an elevator pitch and how, because you said you wrote it years ago, the bones of it, more or less, the framework, how that came about?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, my big elevator pitch, the kind of widescreen elevator pitch, is epic fantasy, but with vampires and werewolves and sorcerers, but no humans. And the sort of second little elevator pitch is like a world of immortals where everyone's immortal, but there's no mortal people, there's no humans. So those two ideas have been with me since I wrote my first book, when I quit teaching, and that stupid story I told you a couple of minutes ago. And I'm like, I'm like a dog with a bone. So if I get an idea, I'll just keep doing it for like decades, right? Until someone lets me publish it or whatever. So my very first book was basically Lightfall, but with like a couple more races, a couple more species in it. It had shapeshifters and banshees. And I really liked it. It was kind of cool. But I sent it. So it's my first book. I sent it off to I think 49 agents. This is the publishing question, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. If you want me to talk more about my story, let me know. I've
Keep it
just
going.
gone straight into trauma.
We'll get more into Lightfall as we go on.
Okay, cool. So I sent it off to like 50 agents, I think, and got 49 rejections. Standard first novel, don't know what I'm doing. And one request for a full, which is the full manuscript, if you're not into publishing speak. And I was such an idiot. I wasn't on social media. So like I only joined Twitter when I got my agent. Obviously, I'm not on Twitter anymore. I'm on Blue Sky, yeah. But I only joined Twitter when I got my agent 3 years ago. And so I just didn't have any. I didn't have any publishing friends, any author friends. I was just Googling stuff. So I was just a complete moron who thought I'm gonna get published, man. This is gonna happen. So I got one full request, and I was like, "This is it. This is it. Let's go." And then like after 3 months, I just emailed him, and I was like, "Oh, I hope you're okay." Like classic British email. "Oh, have you had a chance to read my manuscript, which my whole life is now based around?" Um, and then they just ghosted me. They just never replied. Now, I'm not going to shade them too much because that happens. Although I do think agents they fair enough, they can't always reply to initial queries, but they should always reply to a full. I think that's trash behavior if he goes to full. Hashtag trash behavior. But I was, but I was devastated because they didn't know this, but like this was like everything I'd put all my hopes and dreams on, and I was devastated. I spent 6 months in some like pathetic kind of tortured artist kind of classic moping thing. I was like, that's it, I'm done. What am I going to do now? Gonna have to like, I don't know, go into politics or something.
Just another
It's truly your
like
villain origin
random
story.
ass pivot.
Yeah, that would have been my really. Can you imagine? Yeah, I'd probably be like Viktor Orban or something now, or yeah. I don't know why I named Hungarian president or prime minister. That was a weird flex.
Yeah, Ed's Hungarian now.
Yeah.
For anyone who
Also,
didn't know.
I'm not right wing. Not that I respect that. That makes it sound like I'm right because I said I wanted to be Viktor Orban. Anyway, never mind.
You're digging your own hole, dude.
This is what I do, Adrian. This is what I do. Every single interview. So anyway, after 6 months, I kind of got back on the horse. Wrote first of all, I wrote the sequel, To Be Stubborn, and then thought, okay, let's just give up on this. And then I wrote another book, which was kind of the same: vampires, werewolves, epic fantasy, no humans, everyone's immortal, called The Misting. And then I sent that off to about 70 agents this time, and I got 67 rejections and 3 requests for a full. They didn't ghost me this time; they just rejected me on the full. And then I just went, and this was only like the space of like 3 years, or whatever. And then because that's all I'm doing, I'm just like starting up my editing career, getting no money and just writing. And then I just wrote 2 random books with vampires and werewolves, but no humans, and sorcerers in a world where everyone's immortal, but it's epic fantasy. And then I didn't even bother with those because I was just like, come on, man, let's. And then I sat down and said, let's do this seriously. So what we're going to do, we're going to do a book with vampires and werewolves and sorcerers, but no humans. Everyone's immortal, but we're going to make it good this time. So I've written like 4 books.
What is that, like 4th or 5th times the try?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, you guys know this obviously because you're authors, but like you just get better. The more books you write, the better you get. That's the way it rolls. Even if you don't, even if you don't read MJ's awesome story Bible, which you should definitely do. Is it called Story Bible?
Yeah, it is.
Yes, nailed it.
Good plug.
I'm not getting paid by MJ to this. But I mean, you should definitely read that stuff like that. But even if for some reason you didn't, you kind of just get better just by writing. So I had a bit more confidence now. I was like, I actually think I'm not terrible anymore. So I wrote Lightfall, and that took a bit longer. That took it's about 2 years, kind of going back and forth on it, send it out to my friends and stuff, my beaters. And then I was like, I need a bit of a flex. I'm so tired of not knowing anyone. I'm so tired of not having anything to say in my query letters. I'm so tired of not having like anything to show an agent that I've taken this a bit seriously. So I managed to get on a course called the Curtis Brown Creative Writing Course, which is like a London agency, Curtis Brown. They run this course. They help you finish your manuscripts and make it better. And then it's like 50% wholesome. They're making your book better. And I met some awesome friends on it, which I'm still friends with. And it's 50% cynical, because then you can put it in your query letter, and some people would be like, that's revolting, and I'm not gonna question that. But what you got to remember, guys, is that like I was like 5 years in or whatever, 6 years in, and I'm getting like, I just need a bit of a flex. So I don't know if I'm using the word flex correctly there. But,
Sure.
oh, awesome! God, I'm so cool. Yeah. God, I'm like millennial meets Gen Z.
Self-aggrandization doesn't work well in
It's awful, isn't it? So Adrian will edit that out. It's fine. Don't edit it.
No, I'm going to keep it in so you all know.
No, people need to see this so they can like stop me and avoid me.
Sorry, I just dropped my mic.
Greta's out. Greta's gone.
Yeah, Greta's done.
This is her first and last time as
bring back MJ. Oh my god! All right, continue, Ed. Continue.
Okay, so I do this course and I come off it, and it's like a month later, and I query, and this time I do it properly. This time I only query 10 agents, which you're kind of meant to do first, and then you keep querying more, see what happens. And about literally a week goes by, and an agent called Harry Illingworth, who in the unlikely event he's watching is the best agent in the UK. He's got better. I was about to say he's got better things to do. That was like me shading you. I mean, than watch me. Everyone should watch this.
Ed's done.
Oh my god, what's happening?
Oh no, my mic fell again. I gotta go.
I thought you'd gone, Greg.
Oh my god. So Harry.
So about a week later, Harry gets in touch and he's like, can I get you full? And then he reads in like 3 days, and we have a Zoom. And I should say, like, I like to think that actually the Curtis Brown creative flex, I think according to him, he just liked the book, but we'll never know. So let's not dig into that. let my ego think that, yeah. And then you're meant to go back to agents and be like, oh, I've got an offer. What are you going to do? Like some kind of shit sort of apprentice thing, or Dragon's Den? That's a better example. Dragon's Den is like, do you guys have Dragon's Den over there?
In Canada, yeah, we had it.
Yeah. Greta's like, again. Just a bunch of dragons and cave. I don't know.
Hey, you guys shrugged off the yoke of the British Empire, so that's what you get.
Yeah. Oh, do you have something called Shark Tank? Have I made it up?
Yes.
Shark Tank is very similar. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the shit version of Dragon's Den, isn't it? They just, and the name wise, I'm sure the TV show is great. Anyway, back to the point, Ed. So I was meant to go back to agents and say, would you like my book, because this awesome guy wants my book. I didn't do that, and I don't know if I offended him by doing that. I often think about that. But I just thought I really like this guy, and I was like, I just want to. He's cool. I like him. I just want. So I just said yes. And then that's how I got my agent. And then, so I realized I've been talking for ages. Do you want me just to tell you what happened in the book deal?
Go for it.
I told myself I wasn't going to ramble, because in my head, I'm like a cool guy who just says, like, some authors, they come on, like Tchaikovsky or whatever, and they just say something really cool. and then you say something, and they say a really good point succinctly, and then you say something. And I was like, I'm going to be like that for once. And instead, I'm just like, then what's HMV? And
It's fun, man. We're just hanging out.
we are, just hanging out with a couple of friends. Unfortunately, people watching.
Therapy session.
So then we did some agent edits, which is when, if you don't know how this goes, your agent looks at your book and goes, let's do some editing. That's pretty self-explanatory, to be honest. And then we went on what's called submission, which I mean, everyone watching this knows what I'm talking about. It's like, never heard of this. Then we went on submission, and I failed to get a deal in the UK, which is fine. I'm not bitter about that. But I got very, very lucky to get a deal in America with St. Martin's Press. And then that was 3 years ago, I guess. I think I got delayed a year. And now it's coming out. I skipped a lot
and
of debut.
Hopefully that leads to a UK deal.
Yeah,
it could circle back.
Yeah.
It could circle back. You never know. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I loved hearing throughout this whole 7-8 year process how you just kept coming back to the idea of vampires and werewolves, and then sorcerers got added in, but never any humans. So do you want to dig into that a little bit? What was it about vampire, werewolves, sorcerers that you kept coming back to, and maybe talk a little bit about why
you hate humans
just didn't make the cut?
Yeah, why do I hate humans? So I guess what I'm really interested in is what would a world be like with just immortals, right? So even before we get onto the why vampires and werewolves bit, what if you just take out the humans completely and you just have a world with immortals? So what is that like? And one of my, in the way that reviewers often summarize your book better than you, or readers, I should say, reviewers often summarize your book better than you. One of my early readers was like, oh, the mortals are myth. And I'm like, oh yeah, shit, the mortals are myth. Why didn't I, sell my book like that earlier? So if you just swap it around so that humans are myth and the immortals are just the normal people, what does that do? What opportunities does that bring up for you? And it's funny because I got, I'm not saying this to be bitter. I'm just saying this because it's really interesting. One of my early bits of feedback from one of the UK publishers, who I won't name because I'm not that guy, was like, this book does not work because if you have vampires and werewolves, you need humans. You got to have humans because otherwise they don't work. The whole point is we contrast humans with vampires, right? So if you take imagine, I don't know,
but that to me is kind of an inane point, because the human in the experience is you, the reader, and therefore you can contrast regardless of whether or not there's a human in the story.
Oh man, where were you? Where I got this email?
Well, and also what makes vampires monstrous isn't necessarily how they eat, it's how they move in the world. It's you can't attain that level of wealth and power and beauty without preying on people less fortunate than you.
Yeah.
So...
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So in a way, it makes complete sense to me for those two reasons. But I guess if I'm being fair, I suppose what you could argue is that if you're just doing horror vampires, then obviously you need humans because they need to be scared of you. And if you're doing just Twilighty romance vampires, then you got to have that cool human vampire romance. But I think with mine, what I tried to do is tried to make it different, because the you guys kind of just intimated that the vampires are kind of the humans in the sense that they have the same interests as the humans. They're trying to build a society. It's very political in my books. I do a little bit of economy, especially in the second one. And there's the whole thread of the first one is about class, right? So it's not so much well, how do you do an interesting story if you take the humans out? It's how can you show human themes by using a non-human race? And in the same way that the genre of fantasy can be used to reflect on the real world, even though it's obviously a secondary world, similarly, treating vampires like humans and seeing what happens can actually, by taking it away from humans, show us some very human ideas. So that's what I wanted to explore. If you throw in immortals who drink blood, but they're trying to make a society and they've got the same old rich versus poor kind of thing, what does that tell us about our own society? I'll give you a very quick example. So the blood system in my book is the working class vampires have rubbish blood, like cow blood, and they still age because it's bad blood and it makes them weak and mentally like they're a bit sluggish and they're not very powerful. The middle class have like blood that stops them aging and it makes them kind of a bit more clever and strong. And then the rich get like the best blood, which just makes them feel like, I mean, I probably shouldn't say this, but it's kind of some drug analogies there. It just makes them feel like awesome all the time, you know?
Reading the book, it kind of like the sort of like hierarchy that came into my head is just like, you know, the lower class people have to eat like ultra processed food, and then the middle class people are eating like some processed food and some good, and then like the super rich people, oh, we can go to Whole Foods, we can get all like the best top quality organic and supplements and all that shit.
Yeah, exactly. The rich are like, oh, I was about to say we can go to Waitrose, but sorry, Greta, that's the supermarket in the UK. What's a posh supermarket or a superstore, as you call it, whatever?
Whole Foods is probably,
Whole Foods is the posh one.
Whole Foods.
Whole Foods, okay, yeah. So the rich are going to Whole Foods, and the poor are like going to
like 7-Eleven.
7-Eleven, yeah. It's getting constantly held up by gunmen, all the time.
Yeah.
The 7-Eleven, but yeah, no, that's like you kind of fed into my point amazingly there, Adrian. You've read my mind, because what I wanted to do with the blood, and I don't know if I've been successful at this, but I had a lot of fun doing it, is that my belief about society is that we think that the poor should be able to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. That's a very common American sort of idea. And you should just be able to like make yourself richer, make yourself better by just kind of like trying more and having a bit of self-belief. And to a certain extent, that's not a lie, right? But what's often forgotten is that there's a kind of poverty trap. There's a poverty cycle. So if you eat bad foods, you know, if you just go to 7-Eleven to get your food, and you're going to be tired all the time because healthy food makes you more energetic. You're going to have vitamin deficiencies, whatever. And if you don't get a very good sleep because, like, you know, like your landlord hasn't fixed some leak in your flat, whatever, and it's just dripping all night, you know, or whatever, 1,000 examples that people do when they don't have as much money in a kind of capitalist society, then your life is harder. And so you don't have as much time in your day or energy to kind of be like, right, I'm going to lift myself up through the classes. And you kind of get into this cycle where it's like you get more kind of entrenched in just trying to get by in poverty. And then that makes it you less likely to kind of get on. And we never talk about it. I think like we never talk about what lack of sleep does. We talk a bit about nutrition. And so that's what I'm trying to do with blood. And that goes back to the idea of how you use immortal beings to show issues about the human race. Like my vampires are kind of literally trapped in poverty because they literally can't drink the blood that would make them stronger and stop them aging and all that stuff. So it's a literal physical symbol of poverty and the fact they can't get good blood.
And that poverty trap, this kind of builds on it perfectly, is like another thing that doesn't often get talked about, but you touch on, not necessarily like overtly, but something that you touch upon especially through the POV of Sam, who's the main POV character in the book.
Yeah.
She's a poor maid. And one of the things that poverty kind of traps you into is lack of access to certain things. So in the case of like poverty in the States, for instance, it's like you could be in a food desert and you literally do not have access to sources of fresh food. And therefore 7-Eleven is the thing that you are able to access and get food from, but it ends up being ultra processed. In the case of Sam, she's a poor maid. She's in the lowest class. Her access is literally to the cheapest, least nutritious form of blood there is.
Yeah.
And so much of her motivation is seeking access to higher quality blood and things that are, at least from a hierarchical level, are outside of her grasp, essentially. And I wanted to ask you how, like, all of this thinking about how you organize the vampires and how you bring in the other races, how you bring in werewolves and sorcerers, how this kind of mentality played into how you represented like the cultural and political dynamics between the races.
Yeah, so I mean that's a good point about the idea of access, because if you're my main character Sam, like you said, is a maid, so she has no hope of becoming. I call them the midways, my middle class, the midways. Very imaginative by me there. So she has no hope of skipping to the middle class. Like you say, there's just no way she can access that next level. So that kind of goes back to the point of like, well, you've got no humans there. So where's the kind of challenge coming from? So it's coming from class mobility within the vampire race. But then there's also a contrast between the kind of the societies between vampires, werewolves, and sorcerers. So First Light, my vampire city, is just a very kind of like regimented working class, middle class sort of feudal lords kind of thing going on. Then my werewolves are basically kind of like, I guess, communitarian, but they come together to make some big decisions. So they're all in their different packs, and they do their own thing in their packs. So you have like pack law. This is only in book 2. Yeah, I don't really talk about this in book 1. But book 2 is all like werewolves as well as vampires. And so they're kind of like, so I thought a lot about a different system for them. So they only come together to discuss foreign affairs. So they're very much kind of like, I don't know, in a weird way, you could see like a future kind of isolationist America. I'm not saying we're going to go down that path, but like you could sort of see that happening where you have kind of like different states and they're all doing their own thing. I'm not saying that would be good. I'm just saying potential future. Hopefully it doesn't happen.
People. Yeah.
Although who was it who said all the states, there should be red states and blue states, not in like Obama way. I mean, like, it was Marjorie Taylor Greene, wasn't she? She was like, the blue states should just separate from the red states. She actually said that. I'm not going to say that's good, you know. I'm not getting political. I'm just saying those ideas are out there. Okay, so my werewolf
secession.
My werewolves could be Greta's future. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, so yeah, so they come together to discuss foreign affairs, and then my sorcerers are kind of like a little bit more the mix between them. So they're all quite unpleasant, and they sort of have a system where, depending on what sorcerer you are, you're in a different sect, and you know, they all kind of fight for power. It's kind of like a horrible Machiavelli sort of proto-authoritarian thing. So I don't know if I'm answering your question very well. Kind of forgot what the question was.
How you kind of those themes that you're playing with, how those ended up feeding into the way that you created the dynamics between the races.
Yeah, so I've got all those separate political things, and then what I'm interested in is like, how do they come together? Because the vampires and werewolves, guy called Mike's Book Reviews, a booktuber, he put it really well to me the other day. He said it's like the Hatfield and McCoys. Werewolves and vampires always like the Hatfield and McCoys, which I was like, that's a great analogy. And in my book, they are like that. They hate each other. And that's not a particularly original thing to do. There's lots of fancy books where you have, whether or not you want to call it like Russia or America or Israel, Palestine or whatever, like two bodies that are just constantly antagonistic towards each other. So that goes back to how, like, yeah, there's no humans, but I'm kind of doing a lot of human themes. But then I'm also interested in immortality. So I'm like, well, forget humans for a second. What happens if you just have 3 races and they all hate each other at different periods and different centuries, but they all remember it because half of them have been alive for like 300 or 400 years. So some of them die because, I should say, they're immortal, but they're not invincible. I should have said that right at the start. So they can live for centuries as long as they avoid getting killed, right? And it's hard to kill them, but, you know, there's some brutal, massive wars in my history, my book history, not my own history. And if everyone's immortal, half the people who survive that will remember that, so they'll just carry this hate with them for ages. So imagine, I don't want to keep giving real world examples, you know, because a lot of people are experiencing that right now, and so, you know, I don't want to bring up any nasty feelings. But like, imagine an awful conflict around the world at the moment, or in the past, or in the future, and imagine all the people involved in that, as well as having the hatred that they carry from their ancestors, that they've learned, like that should be my land, and I know this from centuries of history. Imagine if they actually remember that and they carry that hate with them for just centuries. Imagine how bitter and twisted, or sad, or depressed, or psychotic, or even just overly ambitious, or maybe false hopeful. Like, how would that affect politics when half the people can remember all the battles? So the summary is, in some ways, it's about humans. It's about how all these different political systems interact, which is obviously what we experience on a daily basis with, with Britain and America and everywhere in the world. But in another aspect, it's about something that humans can't possibly do in the real world, which is like, what happens if your memory is just like centuries long? Because it kind of gets a bit fucked up if that's the case.
Mm-hmm. And that kind
That's so
of
true.
yeah, and that kind of feeds into like this the Greys, which are kind of, at least
The
in
boogeyman.
the boogeyman. It's like a more nebulous enemy, at least in
Yeah.
book one.
Cliche.
The monsters at the
Boogeyman.
gates kind of thing.
Yeah,
But
quite literally.
yeah, like
Oh.
how does like an enemy like that, because you're talking about the history and the fact that immortality affects the ways that people hold grudges and view history as a very literal influence on their present day thinking. Because it's a different thing to be like, oh, I remember generational history, like what my ancestors passed down, like my grandma is from the UK, and she had like a bit of an aversion to me living in Germany, because she's like, why would you live in Germany? She told me a really funny story when she's like, oh, I love traveling Europe. I went everywhere. I went to France and Belgium and Denmark and Poland and Czech Republic and Austria and Switzerland. I'm like, everywhere except Germany. Yeah. But how does something like the Greys, this very monumental enemy with that can't really be touched and isn't really in your face in the first book, how does that play into like the history of the world that you've created and like the events that are going on in the book?
So the Greys are doing two things. So I'm very obvious. I'm a very obvious writer in some ways. Like, I call them the Greys, as in like, ooh, they're not black or white, they're grey. So what do they represent? Very, very clever of me. But the first thing I wanted to do is I wanted to investigate, like, again, what would happen if we just spend all this time fighting on Earth like we do? What if aliens just rocked up? And suddenly we're like, oh, can we just suspend our fighting between us because these new guys have just rocked up and they're just fucking us up? So that would just completely change the dynamic. And I think that's a really interesting idea. What happens if all the enmities and all the antagonistic relationships you have between countries, what happens if you suddenly realize kind of how, at the moment at least, how daft that was, because you're getting beaten the shit out of by this completely new entity that's way more powerful than you. So my Greys have, I should say, they have like weapons which no one understands, like futuristic weapons, and they're guns essentially. I can't really say, they're sort of sci-fi style guns. Who knows why? You can probably guess. Don't spoil the trilogy yet. So I told myself I wouldn't spoil the trilogy. God damn it. No, it's actually double bluff that for some reasons which I can't say, or triple bluff. So they have futuristic weapons, so they can't even begin to fight them because they'll just shoot this gun at you and they'll just destroy you, right? So on the one hand, that's an interesting device for me to say, how do all the political relationships change when everyone's got to do like a stalemate, right? And it kind of it's like a reset button or pause button on a history. If you look at all my history, which you find out a bit in the first book and then much more in the second and third books, it's just like big war, peace, kind of small war, peace. Oh, we're gonna have peace for a few years now. Oh no, these crazy Greys have come along. And my book takes place 100 years after the Greys have decimated the Centerlands, which are like where all the cool big cities were. And before then, Lightfall, which is the name not of the city that takes place in the book, but of the city that's no longer a city because it was destroyed by Greys. Lightfall was like New York or London or whatever. Like, it was the big cosmopolitan city where all the vampires and werewolves and sorcerers were getting a bit more progressive, well, for a fantasy world anyway, and beginning to hang out and stuff. And, you know, like the Warns, which is what I call my working class because they get worn because they age, they were beginning to get more rights and more access to blood, and everything was going well. And then the Greys rock up, they destroy the Centerlands, sorcerers go to their home, werewolves have to go to their home in the east in a forest, and the vampires go back to First Light, which is where most of the story takes place. So you've got this whole kind of like progressing, and it's just like stopped. It's just like goodbye to progress. So that allows you to look at what happens to society when progress is stopped and things start to slide back. Wonder if there's any terrible analogies to modern day world. You know,
Can you stop talking about the potential futures for Greta's country?
You guys are just like about to earn some roommates. I mean, does anyone want to adopt?
There's plenty of room down here in Ecuador.
No, don't come over here, Greta. We're terrible as well. We have no idea what we're doing. Well, I don't even know where you go anymore. I don't know. Just on a desert island or something. That sounds quite fun, doesn't it? Just hang out on a desert island. Not Jeffrey Epstein's desert island. Don't go and get it. Sorry. No,
please no.
Right, stop making bad jokes. But yeah, so what happens if everything is on like a stalemate and everything stopped and progress starts to backslide? So that was the first reason. The second reason is that I call them Greys because they have this like, you can imprint whatever you want onto them. So if you can imprint whatever you want onto them, then the first thing that happens is that you get afraid because anything unknown. Remember Batman? I said remember Batman. I completely forgotten a really famous phrase. You always fear what you don't understand. That's the one, isn't it? Yeah. You always fear what you don't understand. That Carmine Falcone. Yeah. Batman Begins reference. So my vampires in First Light are absolutely terrified of the Greys, and because of that, they can't really do anything because when you're afraid all the time, you can't make any progress. You're just constantly trapped by fear. So that allows you to kind of, you have this stupid cliche villain, which is just like got the most ridiculous name, the Greys, on purpose. And that means that you can just explore what fear does. And I can't say any more because I would spoil who the Greys are and why the Greys came. But if you're clever than me, you can maybe think about, I just kind of spoil the whole book again for you. But the Greys have caused the entire city to become more like totalitarian, more kind of like class-based. And that allows me to explore the consequences of fear, essentially, and how a society can stop the halt of progress. Or is it just inevitable that if you're afraid all the time, you'll just backslide into outside of democracy?
And that is a very fitting analogy for your writing career, too. It's like your fear was
totalitarianism.
No, not
your fear was keeping
your fear was keeping you from progressing as an author.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant like, am I becoming a Nazi?
Hey, you did drop that Hungarian president reference, so
yeah, I know I'm blonde, Adrian, but you know we're all blonde. But all three of them.
Yeah. Part of the analogy, not the whole.
Yes, yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, fear, overcoming. Well, being an author is about overcoming fear of rejection, isn't it? We're constantly terrified of.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're going to be exposed.
Rejection of the agent, rejection of the editor, rejection of the reader, all across the board.
Yeah,
and just being too stubborn to quit.
Yeah,
exactly. It's terrible, isn't it? You're constantly having people, even if you're a famous author, at some point you'll have someone go, "No, I don't want this new book." You're just constantly being rejected. It's like being in a relationship where like every 6 months or like, every year on Valentine's Day, they just turn around and say, "By the way, I kind of hate you a bit." But then the rest of the year, they're like, "Oh, I like you." And you just have to put up with that.
Just seed that doubt every Valentine's Day. Just like a cake. Here's a happy Valentine's cake that just says "fuck you."
Happy Valentine's Day. I think I could do better.
Yeah. And then the next day, you're the best I've ever had.
I regret my life choices. Imagine Valentine's Day if it was just the opposite and you just had to absolutely slate your partner. Yeah.
I feel like that
You
would lead
took
to
away
a
my
lot
dreams.
of breakups. Yeah.
Yeah.
You
If it
took
wasn't-
away my dreams.
If it wasn't for my kids, I'd dump you. That's a good card. Yeah.
Wow.
Sorry.
And on
This is
that
like the most anti-Hallmark moment.
Yeah. And on that anti-Hallmark moment, we'll wrap this up.
It's a terrible way to feel. Everyone's just like
so before
crying.
everyone just like immediately gives up hope on life,
Jesus
why don't
Christ.
you give us like a quick bit of soundbite writing advice that you can share to the aspiring authors out there?
And a weird or random fact that you find to be utterly fascinating.
Okay. Sorry, can you repeat that? I was still laughing at the. Repeat that, sorry.
Two things.
Oh
Can
my
you give
God.
us a quick soundbite writing advice that you can give to aspiring writers out there? And the second one was a weird or random fact that you find just utterly fascinating.
Oh, okay. So writing advice even. It's going to be trad pub based because I'm a trad author. It would be not responsible to give indie advice, even though I have a lot of awesome indie author friends. But I'm not going to pretend I know how to be an indie author. So apologies if that's not relevant. But trad, um, I'm going to give like a really bit of cliche advice, which is that I see a lot of miserable people who are like querying and they're miserable all the time, understandably, because they're like, this is so rubbish. This is so lame. Like, I keep getting rejected, and all I want to do is write a book. And there's a lot of sadness out there. And I completely get it because it's brutal. It's such a brutal process. So, my advice, and I really hope this isn't taken the wrong way, but I've learned how to do it myself, is like, stop. So I'm laughing because this is the most cliche thing I've ever said, but I really believe it's true. Treat your heart like you would treat your money. Like, stop putting your heart in a glass case that's ready to be smashed. Wow, that's the most poetic thing I've ever said. What I mean by that is, if you would not take your life savings out of the bank and give them to a guy who said, I'm going to take your life savings. There's a 1 in whatever 500 chance that I'm going to give them back to you tenfold. But other than that, yeah, it's just going to go. You'd be like, well, of course, I'm not going to do that with my money. But what we do a lot as like writers when we're trying to get published or whatever, we do that with our heart, right? We give it to TradPub, which is a lottery. It's not based on skill. It's based partly on skill, but it's mostly luck. You know, I didn't get a publishing deal because I'm Captain Awesome. I got it because I'm not completely terrible, and I got very, very lucky, right? It's mainly luck, and that's a hard lesson for some people to hear, but it's also true. And so it makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense to put your entire soul and your hope and your dreams into this process, because you'll just make yourself sad, and you're better than that. You know, you don't deserve to be sad all the time. So I'm not saying don't have this amazing dream, because that would be hypocritical, because it's what I did. But it kind of made me miserable for like quite a few years, because it was the only thing I wanted to do. And it kind of made me sad a lot of the time, you know? And I don't regret it because it got me to where I am. But I kind of wish I'd been a bit more chill about it, you know? And not only do we have this awesome other option these days of indie publishing, which is now on an equal par, thanks to all the progress in the last five years, but publishing is so problematic now that if you can do it, great, go for it. Like if you think you can do it and you want to do it, go for it. But like, don't make it the be all and end all, and don't just try, and whether it's through meditation or whether it's through support from your friends or networks, whatever, like, don't put your heart on this pedestal and let TradPub just beat the shit out of it, because like it will just make you unhappy for years, and like you're better than that.
Yeah.
Sorry, you probably wanted like specific advice.
No, that's
Just
actually
crying over here.
actually perfect. Yeah. Don't let agents pummel the shit out of your heart. You don't deserve it.
Yeah.
Don't let publishing houses pummel shit out of your heart either.
Yeah.
Yeah. Give your heart to like a dog or something.
The dog just licks it and makes you feel happy.
Yeah, exactly. Or video games. Video games, man, they will never break your heart. Or a wife or husband, you know, whatever.
Whatever floats your boat. Dog, husband, wife, or video games.
Video games.
Those are your
Top
options.
3.
Only 2 options.
All right. Random fact, Ed.
Oh, random fact. Okay. That I think is interesting. Oh, this is one of those questions where, like, if you have prep time, you come up with something cool. Oh God, random fact. Okay, random fact. I think it's cool. The word awesome, which means like obviously really cool and stuff. No, that sorry, that's not what am I thinking of? Awful. Yeah, sorry, awful. The word awful used to actually mean like awe-inspiring because it could. Is that right? No, that's
Full of awe.
Right, because it was
Full of awe.
filled with awe.
yeah, filled with awe. Yeah, it's a rubbish fact. That's kind of a rubbish fact, isn't it?
No, but it's
Like,
very
that's just
it's
something-
very perfect because you're an editor
Yeah.
and this is a writing podcast.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like really clever people have all these facts at their fingertips, and then blaggers like me just never have. Like some people just have like 10 incredible facts, and then when Greta asks them this question, they'll just be like, "Oh, did you know that the sloth is actually a bear? Oh my God, sloth and bear!
Here's your
know
random
that.
fact. The sloth is a bear.
I didn't know that. That's adorable. I love
I made
that.
it up. That's not true, by the way.
Oh, damn it. Now I can't tell my kids.
Yeah,
Random fact
You might-
misinformation.
it might be true. Like, let us know. Like, write in. Don't write in. Like, email
Let us
in.
know in the comments. Wrong
Yeah.
answers only.
Yeah,
Yeah,
is a
wrong
sloth a
answers
bear?
only.
Oh my God.
A sloth is British. That's
Sloth is
why.
actually part of the anteater and armadillo family.
Oh,
The same taxon.
Okay.
Yeah. While
The more you know.
sloth bears are in fact bears.
okay.
Go
So
figure.
sloth is like half armadillo.
half armadillo, half anteater with fucking crazy claw fingers.
Claws.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I'm
Alright.
so glad this happened.
This beautiful hot mess. Well, Ed, thank you for joining us for said hot mess. It's been an absolute blast.
It's been an absolute pleasure. I don't know if I came across as like a chaotic, bizarre rambler, but it's been fun,
we are
and that's
chaos,
what matters.
so, yeah,
It's been fun.
Chaotic
That's
and
what
bizarre
matters.
is the brand, man.
that's the
You're
brand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is now.
As well, if you contribute $5 or more to our Patreon, you can access an exclusive reading by Ed from his debut novel, Lightfall. So go check that out and go pick up Lightfall when it's out next week, January 14th.
It's
I'm
so
gonna say this
good, you
one out.
guys.
Yeah.
Get
Yes,
it. Get it.
that's a review copy. That's not the final book. I should be receiving the final book soon, actually, but
Yeah,
sadly,
you should.
there you go.
Beautiful.
Also,
Ed, can you let everyone know where they can find you online?
yes, I was going to say read Mushroom Blues and Queen of Days and
thank
Frozen
you.
Crown, but you've already done that at the start, so
And among these. Yeah.
pointless act of kindness. That. No, you guys are very awesome. Socials, yeah. So you can find me Blue Sky, Instagram, TikTok. I've left Twitter, sadly, and you can find me there at Ed Crocker Books, Blue Sky, Instagram, TikTok, and you can sign up to my newsletter, Get Cropped, which I've just launched, and the first one will be going out on January the 6th, and I'm going to put a lot of effort into it because I have a lot of time on my hands, so it won't just be like standard author news. You'll have like an exclusive short story every month. You'll have like giveaways. You'll have like a SFF and horror news roundup, all my news and reviewing stuff, and
Nice.
bizarre stuff I've not thought of. So please sign up to that on my socials or my website www.ed-crocker.com, or not if you want to avoid this nonsense. Yeah, I don't know, buy my book.
No,
so
but
I can...
you got to say, and if you don't want to sign up for it, you can get crocked.
Yeah, thanks, Adrian. Yeah, if you don't
Yeah,
sign
there
up,
you go.
like, get fucked. Sorry, get fucked.
Oh my God.
Oh,
And you can
this
also
is,
follow.
why am I like? How did I get here? How like? Is this just
because we like you. You're my friend. You're my editor.
You're just nice people.
Yeah.
That's a problem. That's probably nice people. They get morons on like me who just talk nonsense for like 2
Oh,
hours.
shush now.
Shush.
Yeah.
Don't listen to Ed. I'm
Get
obsessed with this
fucked.
book. And if two people in this book don't end up together,
Yeah.
grievous bodily harm coming to you,
Ship
sir.
'em. Ship them.
We can talk about it after the show wraps,
Yeah.
so we don't spoil
They die in
anything.
the second book. I'm just kidding.
You can also follow SFF Addicts on all the social media platforms at SFF Addicts Pod. You can follow me at Adrian M. Gibson. You can go check out my debut novel, Mushroom Blues, if you want some fungi in your life. Greta, what about you?
I'm on mostly Instagram and TikTok these days, though my shambling shade is on Twitter every once in a while at Greta K. Kelly. And yeah, come over and say hi and talk D&D with me, people.
Yeah. Buy our books, support our kids. Buy MJ's books, support her and her cat. And thank you all very much for listening. Stay tuned next week for part 2 with Ed for our mini masterclass on how to write great dialogue. For now, keep reading, keep imagining, and we'll see you next time on SFF Addicts.